Hey, welcome class to another unit, and for this unit we're gonna cover how Anglo-Americans clash with Mexicanos, and more specifically in Texas. The 3 decades of the early 1800s, talking about 1820s, you're gonna learn that Mexico is no longer attached to Spain. Mexico finally is independent and coincides with the US moving west. When Mexico inherited all that vast land of the US Southwest, they came up with the idea of bringing Americans to colonize Texas. And that's one of your videos, a video lecture done by Professor Jacobo, where he covered these colonization acts. The vast West needs to be populated. Those small colonies in Texas at the time, they were having a hard time fighting the Apaches and the Comanches. And the Americans will already have been fighting these Indian wars, removing all the indigenous people. So why not inviting Anglo-Americans to come to Texas? These colonization acts eventually backfired to Mexico. When Anglos were invited, they came with a leader. At that time, empresario was the label given to the mediator between Anglo-Americans and Mexicanos, and that is Stephen Austin. That rings your bell? Austin, Texas is the capital of Texas. Well, Stephen Austin brought about 25,000 Anglo-Americans, 300 families at the beginning, and the deal was that these families were going to convert into Catholicism. They're going to learn how to speak Espanol, Spanish, and they are going to obey and respect the laws of Mexico. This is really important because you're going to be reading chapter 8 that deals with the anti-Mexican sentiments. And we're going to learn that from the 1500s all the way up to even today, these anti-Mexican sentiments that are rooted on the division of Protestants and Catholic in Europe, English and Spanish, they hated each other at one time. And that's the chapter that we are going to explore by Raymond Paredes, where he talks about all this literature that was actually fueling this hatred toward the Spanish, and more specific to the Catholic Church. The Pope was being accused of being the devil himself, and this is the beginning of a lot of these English people coming into the colonies with these preconceived ideas that Catholics were equated to the devil. But this chapter is really important because there's more literature that fuels that hatred and kind of it's a bad propaganda for Spain when they were colonizing the New World. We're going to learn about how Bartolomé de las Casas, when he writes about the Spanish conquista, he ended up trashing the Spanish soldiers, rightfully so, because they were abusing the indigenous rights. But this was used by the English as a bad propaganda, and this is known as La Leyenda Negra, the Black Legend. Once again, we're learning about this clash of cultures, and nothing better than when Anglo-Americans come into Texas and they do clash with Mexicanos. We're going to learn how a series of events in Texas forces Tejanos and Americans to break apart from Mexico, and they wanted to become an independent republic. We're going to learn the clash of these cultures again, where Tejanos, who feels that they're equal with the Anglo-Americans counterparts, they're not really equal. At the end of the war, we're going to learn that some of these Tejanos were being kicked out of Texas, and they ended up going into Mexico. For example, Juan Nepomuceno Seguin, who have to deal with this personally. A lot to unpack this week, but these events of the Texas Revolt later triggers a huge war that we're going to cover in the next chapters, and that is the US-Mexican War that finally gets resolved by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That is the border that we have today with Mexico. I hope you enjoyed this unit, and I'm looking forward onto the next. Take care.